Alright folks, today I am going to read The True Story of How Planking Saved My Life, A Survivor's Tale by Donald Jose David Zapata. This is like an audiobook, video, whatever you call it, sort of thing. So let's get into it. I was just a boy once, just like you, assuming that you were ever a boy. I thought that life was all cotton reeds and marshmallow rods. Little did I know that was not to be. The case was this. In the jungles of the Amazon there existed a deep, vibrant hue of flower, and the villagers used this flower to make their bread from the flower. This flower represents my passion, my beauty for flower making. I ordered 2 bushels of the fine grain from the dear sweetie at the coffee shop and ordered my slave boy to pick it up. He was in it for the work experience and I was in it for the cheap labor, so it all worked out to our advantage. Later on he would thank me for giving him the opportunity to advance himself rather than throwing him out on the street like the dog that he was. But I love me an obedient pooch, which of course he didn't have to know, even if maybe a part of him already did. We hauled the turpentine that I had bought into the living room of my adobe, where I felt it necessary to relieve the whipping boy of his duties so as to make my practice a beginning. I much preferred to exude a distinctive aroma of sweat when I worked, and this aroma is one which I knew the sweet kid who so often said such kind words as "Sure thing, boss," and a genuinely honest Huck would not have standed to see, smell, or hear. Would not have standed to let him see, smell, or hear it either. I paid him a penny for an extra day's hard labor, and then sorted out the lab equipment. The doorbell rang. I looked to my slave boy. He looked back at me. Neither of us had expected visitors today. I took his hand firmly in mine, and together we skipped over to the doorway, and each put one of our eyeballs over one half of the door hole, looking out. Thingy. Shiva, I forget the word. It was the police. "Sir, we have a warrant to search your premises for any illegal flower-making activity," he or she or both or whoever it was said. I don't recall. There was a guy in the front and a woman in the back middle side behind him, and I don't know if it was probably the guy who said this because of the timbre of his voice and the fact that he'd probably been on the force longer than women were even allowed in there and giving him an institutional advantage over anybody new who might be coming in later than he did, which could potentially be overcome by institutional restructuring, which would therein make his earned skills less relevant, but that would take hard work, and even hard work is something that has institutionally been shunted onto the boys for a long time, or at the very least hard work in respects to a more officially recognized profession. But what is official or not, of course, does depend a lot on who is in power and whether the subjects believe what the elites say is what's official or not, don't you know? "Bogus," said I to my boy, who also faced institutional disadvantages at the moment until the day when he potentially too finds a way to make me obsolete, and boy howdy would I welcome that day, because progress is great and progress involves as little human involvement as possible, and boy Josephina, would I be happy to die in the name of the lucky few who get to see what that would look like, and if I wasn't one of those few, then all shucks, I sure tried to be. Better luck next time, I guess, except I'd be dead, so there wouldn't be a next time, I guess. "We'd better find a place to hide this stuff," said I. The boy showed a spark of initiative, which is the kind of thing that gives us managers a raging alcoholic Bonnaroo, minus the flaccidity implied therein, but keeping all of the muddied mental stupor implied, especially the kind that one gets when presented with such greatness in life, and then they choose to simply audit it rather than try to figure out what's really going on behind the scenes. "How about me?" The boy whispered the rest of the details of his plan into the old plum splotch remains of my formerly bloodied, currently mangled ear. I nodded as I heard it all laid out in a boot for me, laid bare upon the floor with a sacrificial knife held in my hand. A big old stinky smile grew across my face, revealing the animal instinct that so many try to constantly escape, and perhaps for good reason too. "Let's do it," said I said. The boy ran into the other room, and I got my equipment out from the master bedroom. The doorbell rang again. I came back to the door with my camera around my neck. It was a Nikon or some such thing. I don't give a forked road what it was. Yowzers, you guys. Really. The door opened on the police, and a flash burst into the hallway. La Policía en el Frente blinked under his sunglasses, and La Policía en el Baque blinked under her not having any sunglasses at all. Their vision came into focus, and there I was, standing proudly in front of them, looking as pimped out as ever, and of course not truly understanding what a real pimp looks like both on the inside and out, due to the structural privilege bestowed upon me at birth. Plus, not to mention how undesirable it was for anybody to be or even want to be what I was pretending to want to be in that moment. Buddies, pals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, come in! I opened the door wide for them, muttering the passcode to relock the door upon its closure again. Yes, well, we have a warrant, said the guy in the front of the League of Two, not coming in just yet. Yes, well, I have also invited you in, so now everybody's happy. I took some relatively subdued, less flashing photographs of the boys in blue. Pardon the phrase, people in blue would probably be the less gender-denying way of saying that, but some old habits die hard, you see, and I'm not helping anybody continuing to use outdated slogans, I know, but so here's my apology in parentheses for you who's just trying to get beyond this sort of thing, I know. 2 members of this team of the People's Outsourcing of Violence came in, not thinking in those terms, of course, because if they did, they'd probably be a lot more aggro about it and harder to deal with, be they dealing with an ordinary citizen or somebody totally not guilty like me. They looked around at the living room, which connected the doorway to the room in which I had had all of my supplies. Nice living room, said whichever officer you wanted to say that. Probably the guy officer. That sounds like something he'd say. Implicit bias revealed. Thanks, said I. I then picked up a pillow from the couch and fluffed it extra hard, which aroused the female cop to no extent, because of course it did, and then led the two into the other room where my slave boy had run off to. As soon as we entered, I started taking flashing lights of the brighter variety at the table where my equipment was all laid out, minus the ingredients now. My intern had taken to laying out on top of the table flat across it, behind the beakers and tubes and all that nonsense, and had filled varying test tubulets with different kinds of Kool-Aid to give a multicolored appeal to that scene. What's going on here? Asked the female cop. I'm glad you asked, cop number 2. I muttered the parentheses under my breath. I waved my big, gigantic forearms with such gusto so as to portray the following scene for him and her, here and here. We started making an Instagram account for the advancement of the species, said I. The slave boy nodded and gave a big toothed smile and a thumbs up to the ceiling, otherwise maintaining his position. The nurse cop, whatever, all people look the same to me, checked the buddy of mine skeptically. I pulled my phone up to her face, which seemed to have been hardened by time and genuine effort and countless setbacks which weren't helped at all by shenanigans such as this one. And by phone, I mean to say that my camera was my phone as well, so I put that thing in front of her once well-intentioned face, and hopefully still so, but the world can break a nice one, believe me. On the screen, I had pulled up the Instagram page that my slave child of what in that moment seemed to be a thousand years had concocted in the precious few seconds that had passed while I was chumming up the Blue Crew, and with the lightning-fast Photoshop skills that had seemed irrelevant at the time on his resume, created a montage of him and me and the both of us lying flat across various locations and various poses, all in the name of the ultimate power to the people, of course. Inshallah, holy person, blessed be thy name. We had, like, whatever promotional banner was popular at the time behind us in some of the pictures, which were time-stamped accordingly, which I all thought would be a very nice touch on the slave kid's part, which is why I eventually highly recommended him towards whatever sleazy marketing campaign he moved on to next, although I don't know, I don't really think about him too much anymore. I'm too busy for that, caring about people I once knew business. You know how it is if you're not a loser or a fuck-up or something like that. The female cop, who also wasn't a thumbsucker as far as we know, eyed the pictures as they floated past her oculars. My slime-caked finger slid across the screen every few seconds to show her more. The male cop was standing behind her, looking over her shoulder at the screen. His eyes grew wider, and his heart filled with joy and some glutinous substance which I was too blind to see at the time, but which explains the events that happened shortly thereafter this story, which I won't get into because you and I both have other things to do, I know. I remember this, he said. Planking! He clapped his hands over his head once or twice, but probably twice, maybe even 3 times now that I'm thinking of it. But that might be pushing it, so let's just stick with twice. He turned to the other cop. Planking is the thing where you lie flat somewhere and... He tried figuring out a purpose for the movement besides that, searching with his eyes spinning at REM speed behind his sunglasses throughout the countless pages that comprised the totality of all his mind thoughts, and then that's just what you do, he concluded, a big smile on his face and his hands on his hips in a hero's stance. That's been the first 8 pages of, the true story of how planking saved my life. Look us up on Amazon, Donald Zepeda, Planking. Thanks, bye.